curled my body over the tiny baby as best I could. With hindsight, I can't actually say how long I sat like that, without any contact with anyone, without saying anything, with the shouts of the other passengers like disconnected fragments in the dense howling of the storm. Perhaps it was 10 minutes. It might have been only a few seconds. "Sarah!" A woman was glaring furiously at me and the child, which was entirely pink, from its cardigan to its tiny little socks. The small clenched fists that I was trying to cover with my own hands, along with the furious yelling face, had a pale pink tinge. The mother's face, on the other hand, was blood red. A deep cut in her forehead was bleeding freely. That didn't stop her from grabbing the baby. My sweater fell to the floor. The woman wound a blanket around her daughter with such speed and skill that this couldn't possibly be her firstborn child. She tucked the little head inside the folds, pressed the bundle to her breast, and yelled accusingly at me. "I fell. I was moving along the carriage, and I fell." "It's okay," I said slowly. My lips were so stiff that I had difficulty speaking. "Your daughter isn't hurt, as far as I can tell." "I fell," sobbed the mother, kicking out at me without making contact. "I dropped Sarah. I dropped her." Freed from the troublesome child, I picked up my sweater and put it on. Despite the fact that I was on the way to Bergen, where I was expecting pouring rain and a temperature of +2, I had brought my padded jacket. Eventually I managed to get it down off the hook on which it was still hanging, miraculously. In the absence of a hat, I knotted my scarf around my head. I didn't have any gloves. "Calm down," I said, tucking my hands into the sleeves of my jacket. "Sarah's crying. That's a good sign, I think. But I'm more concerned about—" I nodded in the direction of her forehead. She paid no attention. The child was still crying and was determined not to be consoled by her mother, who was trying to tuck her inside her own fur coat, which was far too tight. Blood was pouring from her forehead, and I could swear it was freezing before it reached the sloping floor, which was now covered in snow and blood and ice. Somebody had trodden on a carton of orange juice. The yellow lump of ice lay in the middle of all the whiteness like a great big egg yolk. The warmth refused to come back into my body. On the contrary, it was as if my thicker clothing was making the situation worse. True, the numbness was slowly receding, but it was being replaced by piercing, stabbing pains in my skin. I was shaking so hard I had to clench my teeth to avoid biting my tongue. Most of all, I wanted to try to turn my wheelchair around so that I was facing all the cries, facing the weeping of a woman who must be right behind me, and the torrent of swear words and curses coming from someone who sounded like a teenage boy whose voice was just breaking. I wanted to find out how many people were dead, how badly injured the survivors were, and if there was any way of securing the windows against which the wind was pressing as it increased in strength with every passing second. I wanted to turn around, but I couldn't bring myself to take my hands out of the sleeves of my jacket. I wanted to look at my watch, but couldn't bear the thought of the cold against my skin. Time was as blurred to me as the whirling snow outside the carriage, a chaos in grey, with strips of blue lilac glimmers from the lights that had started to flicker. I couldn't grasp the idea that it was possible to be so cold. More time must have passed since the crash than I thought. It must be colder than the train driver had said over the loudspeaker on our way into Finse. He had warned the smokers. It was -20, and not a particularly clever idea to try to grab a couple of minutes' pleasure. He must have been wrong. I have experienced temperatures of -20 many times. It has never felt like this. This was a deadly cold, and my arms refused to obey me when I decided to check the time in spite of everything.
"Hello there!"
A man had forced open the automatic glass